The year I turned 20, I married the college student my father had been sponsoring. I paid for his mother's medical bills and sent his little sister to university. Yet I never heard a single thank you. When my father died, my husband walked away with more than half of Sterling's influence. He promised he would always take care of me. Then one afternoon a pregnant secretary knocked on our front door. She claimed she was carrying my husband's child. Later she pretended to fall, and he slapped me. She has nothing left if she loses this baby. I laughed. Then let's all be left with nothing. Before we continue, please subscribe to this channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Julian's secretary showed up, announcing she was pregnant with his child. She braced her hand against the door so I couldn't shut it, a smug smile on her face. I didn't believe her. The woman looked plain, bookish, almost fragile, nothing like Julian's type. Besides, I doubted he would ever give up the Sterling name. It had opened too many doors for him. This secretary posed no real threat. I pried her fingers off the door, one knuckle at a time. 1 second she was fine. The next she was clutching her belly, moaning in pain. I hesitated, then took her to St. Mary's Hospital anyway. The doctor said the patient had asked for her family to be notified. I nodded. Julian was the one who came. He arrived in a rush, shirt wrinkled, breathing hard, as if he'd sprinted the whole way. We met in the corridor. When he saw me he looked awkward, almost guilty. She came to the house today. Why is she saying the baby is yours? He felt like a stranger. Luna, listen, it was an accident, he burst out. I was drunk that night. She drove me home and then the more frantic he became, the guiltier he looked. Luna, you have to believe me. Before he could finish, Tiffany woke up, saw him, and tears spilled down her cheeks as though she'd suffered some great injustice. Julian, I went to explain everything to Luna. She whimpered. I wanted to tell her it was all a misunderstanding, but I'm so useless. My stomach suddenly hurt so much. We have no relationship. It was a misunderstanding. Julian's voice was cold. He shot me a deliberate glance. He seized my hand and pressed it to his chest. Luna, believe me, I've always loved only you. I was just drunk and stupid. Really, just the alcohol. I couldn't muster a single word. Tiffany added fuel to the fire. Luna, Julian and it was only an accident. Don't call me the older sister. It's nauseating. His grip was too tight. I couldn't pull free. The doctor came in, said Tiffany's condition wasn't serious if bed rest would do, and that the ward was short on beds, so she didn't need to stay. I wanted no part of this circus. I turned to leave. Julian hurried after me, eager to drive me home. Down on the sidewalk I waited while he fetched the car, but after 10 minutes in the cold I still hadn't seen him. My phone rang. His voice carried a note of apology. Luna, Tiffany's pregnant and alone. I should take her home first. She's so weak. I'm sorry, Luna. I'll come straight back. Wait for me at home, okay? I ended the call in the freezing wind and waved down a taxi. As I climbed in, I glimpsed Tiffany through the window, demure, docile, Julian's arm half around her. Memories flooded in, chaotic and loud. The first time his startup failed, he'd held me gently and whispered that at least he still had me. I'd asked him what he'd do if someone ever badmouthed me. I can still picture his face as he cradled my cheeks and made his vow. I'll always take your side. I turned away. Drive, please. He said he'd come back to me, and I believed him again. I sat on the couch and watched the clock hands crawl while daylight faded into night. When it was almost dawn, I couldn't wait any longer. I hadn't eaten. My stomach cramped viciously, a scorching ache rising into my chest. I tried to call him. His name sat at the top of my favorites. Declined, declined, declined again. Pain blurred my vision. My phone buzzed with a text and I surfaced long enough to read it. Something's come up. Won't be home tonight. Sleep tight. Julian. The cramping finally broke me. I vomited until nothing was left. He walked in the next morning and found me pale on the sofa. Guilt flickered across his face as he stroked my cheek. Luna, I promise I'll make Tiffany terminate the pregnancy. I listened to his vow and remembered another promise. I'll be right back. Too weak to argue. I nodded. My stomach still burned. He produced a box of dark chocolate truffles to soothe me. He nestled me against his shoulder. These are flying off the shelves. I had someone stand in line for them. He lowered his gaze. I know we both love chocolate. Try one. The truffle melted on my tongue, bitter to the core. He didn't know I loathe anything bitter. I met Julian for the first time in Riverside Public Library. I was engrossed in a book and accidentally knocked his stack of papers to the floor. I set my book down and helped him gather them. When we straightened, he asked eagerly, "You read Dostoevsky too?" He'd noticed the title in my hand. I smiled and said yes. We spent the rest of the afternoon whispering about literature and life. Many times after that, I ran into him again at the Riverside Public Library. One afternoon, after a shouting match lunch with Sterling executives over company business. I refused to admit I was wrong. In the middle of the standoff, he tapped on the office door. Only then did I learn he was one of the scholarship students my father had quietly bankrolled for years. Meeting after meeting, accidental brush after accidental brush, Julian and I slowly grew familiar. That Christmas, he braved a snowstorm to stand in line for dark chocolate truffles. When he finally found me, frost had whitened his lashes. I looped my scarf around his neck in the bitter wind and asked, "Aren't you freezing?" He shook his head and pressed the box of truffles into my hands. I never really liked chocolate, but I couldn't bear to reject the naked sincerity in front of me. I asked him to break off a piece for me. It melted on my tongue, lush with the scent of cacao. No matter how many times I tasted it, the bitterness of chocolate never changed. So why was it suddenly unbearable now? Julian asked expectantly, "Is it good?" I caught the faint perfume clinging to his coat, and tears seeped from the corners of my eyes onto his shirt. The ones from that Christmas were the best. I hadn't slept in more than 24 hours, yet sleep still refused to come. I lay with my back to Julian. He curved an arm loosely around me. The phone on the nightstand vibrated, but Julian let it ring for a long moment, leaning over instead to see if I was asleep. I felt his breath and kept my eyes shut, pretending. Only after another minute did he finally take the call. The room was hushed. I even quieted my breathing. A woman was sobbing on the line, saying she'd had a nightmare and was terrified. Julian murmured, "Tiffany, don't cry." She kept wailing. He soothed her a while longer. Then, clearly unable to refuse her, he set the phone down and slipped out of bed. The mattress dipped slightly and sprang back, leaving me alone again. I felt cold even under the quilt. Had the temperature dropped? The heavy blanket never warmed my hands or feet all night. I stared at the ceiling, counting the hairline cracks until dawn, and Julian never returned. He had stayed out the whole night, again. I knew Tiffany would not be terminating the pregnancy. After my own prenatal checkup at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, I ran straight into Julian's mother. Eleanor was dressed like a society matron, all fur and pearls, a paper sack of herbal supplements swinging from her wrist. She'd just come from the OBGYN wing. Spotting me, she assumed I was there for fertility treatments. After all, I'd been married for years without a child. No amount of supplements will help, she sneered, jabbing a gold-ringed finger at my nose. Sickly thing, married and still barren. You're nothing but a hen that can't lay eggs. Julian married you and works himself to death when he's out there drinking with clients. Where are you? He only agreed to take care of you because of your father. He tells me how exhausted he is, and only Tiffany comforts him when he's overworked. She sniffed. Tiffany knows how to treat a mother-in-law, and her belly's already doing its job. Her gaze raked me up and down, dripping contempt, as if I were worthless and deserved a husband's scorn. Only then did I realize this was how they saw me. After father died, Julian had said he feared I'd tire myself and volunteered to shoulder Sterling's operations. I'd thought of getting pregnant, but he insisted we wait, saying pregnancy was tough and not something you could rush. I'd believed it was love. If he didn't love me, why had every gesture been so tender? And Eleanor, when she'd been at death's door, it was my money that paid her surgeons and pulled her back from the brink. It had taken her a year to recover. Without me, Julian could never have afforded the bills. Even Ivy, Julian's little sister, stayed in college only because I covered her tuition at Stanford. I never heard a single thank you for any of it. Yet in their eyes, I was worthless. Is bearing a son the only qualification a woman needs after marriage? I refused to keep sparring with Eleanor, but she already felt victorious. I couldn't let it go. So at dinner I asked Julian, when is the child going to be terminated? The question snapped his patience. He slammed his bowl down. It teetered, rolled, and shattered on the floor. Porcelain shards scattered like petals. Tiny pieces nicked my ankle. Julian's neck flushed as he jumped up. What are you rushing me for? I told you I'd do what I promised. Why do you keep pushing? I stared at the mess of rice and broken china and thought, what a disaster. Julian's fingers were digging into his palm. He always did that when panic bit him. Am I pushing? You're my husband. Yet another woman is carrying your child. I weighted the words my husband as though they were lead. Wasn't that the height of absurdity? Julian sucked in a breath, forced his voice soft. Luna, Tiffany's health is fragile right now. An abortion could be risky. I just want to wait until she's stronger. Can you understand? The tenderness he wore now made me sicker than Eleanor's venom. I never mentioned termination again. I only filled my days buying tiny toys for a baby I hadn't told him about. I didn't want to reveal my pregnancy, yet I feared he might never know. Maybe if he knew, everything would change. So I left the positive pregnancy test where he could find it deliberately. He read the result 3 times, then hooped and spun me around the living room, setting me down quickly for the baby's sake. He stroked my still flat belly with trembling fingers, Wonderful, I'm going to be a dad. For one fleeting second joy flared in me, then the words jerked me awake. This wasn't his first child. When Tiffany had handed him her own positive test, had he been just as ecstatic? Once he knew about my pregnancy, Julian stayed scrupulously faithful. He let Tiffany's calls ring out and came to bed early every night to lie beside me. He reached to hold me, but I brushed him off, saying the baby might get squashed. I had to admit I was already a little disgusted. I no longer craved his arms the way I once did. And when I ran into Tiffany again, it had to be at St. Mary's Hospital. I muttered to myself that the world really was tiny. The more you want to avoid someone, the surer you are to meet them. Outside the main doors, Tiffany was cradling her bump. When she spotted me, her gaze flicked past my shoulder first. Thought Julian actually cared about you. So where is he for your checkup? She snapped. Voice like a blade. I studied her performance with cold eyes. He isn't here for yours either. The jab hit home. She swung her hand to slap me. She put her whole weight into it. So when I sidestepped, she couldn't stop her momentum. Inertia pitched her forward, and she tumbled down the steps. There were only two, yet plenty to make Tiffany howl. I didn't help her. She wouldn't have taken it anyway. A pair of bystanders escorted her inside. Again I stood outside a ward while Julian barreled in. Dignity gone. His shirt was creased, hair ruffled by the wind. He was frantic, but not for me. This time he didn't go straight in. He raised a hand and slapped me. Julian struck hard. I cupped my cheek, feeling the burn under my palm. For the first time in a hospital corridor, he hit me. Why are you so vicious? He looked heartbroken, staring as if I were a criminal who'd lost her way. After the blow, his fingers trembled. He started picking at his own hand. He always does that when panic overtakes him. Tiffany's weak. She promised once she's better she'll end the pregnancy. Can't you even tolerate her that long? Under my icy hand, the flesh was already swelling, and the cold did nothing for the pain. It hurt. You don't believe me, Julian? After everything, you don't believe me? Tears scalded hotter than the slap. Does he still remember promising to stand by me no matter what? I want to believe you, but you keep disappointing me, he said, voice flat. If Tiffany loses that baby, she loses everything. Then he stepped past me and pushed through the door. Alone in the corridor, the ceiling spun. I reviewed every moment. Who had truly failed whom? Had he ever waited from dusk to dawn with no one beside him? Liar, liar. I couldn't breathe, whether it was my stomach or my womb. The pain twisted like a gear grinding into flesh and never letting go. The hall darkened. Had night fallen so quickly? My strength vanished. I collapsed. Felt something warm rush out. Faintly, I heard voices urging me to stay awake. But I'd never been clearer-headed. Without Tiffany in the picture, Julian still wouldn't trust me. He trusts only himself. When I woke from the faint, the doctor said the baby was gone. Grief had hollowed me out for weeks. Add the instability of early pregnancy, and a violent shock can finish things. I lay there while he spoke, then instinctively touched my belly. Nothing left. Seeing my blank stare, he urged me to look outside. Think of something happy. But outside the window, clouds formed only to be torn apart, and the big trees shed dry leaves. A restless heart sees only despair. Not long after the doctor left, Julian finally appeared. Yet he spoke of Tiffany first. Tiffany's okay, but what you did crossed a line. He sensed the chill around me, seemed to remember I'd miscarried, and added, almost apologetic, the child's gone, but you still have me. If anything happens to Tiffany, she'll have nothing. The same refrain, I'd had enough. Was our baby nothing? My eyes burned. I forced the words out. So my child deserved to die? Julian's answer came as if it were law. It was your just punishment. Luna, you should apologize to Tiffany. Apologize. Tiffany reaped what she sowed. Not a hair on her head was harmed, while I lost my baby, and now I must say sorry. A buzz detonated in my ears. For a long beat I heard nothing. For the first time I knew I had lost utterly. I'd gambled on pregnancy turning the tide, but to someone indifferent it meant zero. Betrayers and their careless cruelty. Why should I still seek a tidy ending? I couldn't swallow it. I couldn't endure. How dare they wound me and act entitled? Silence swallowed the room while I sat wordless so long that Julian shifted. Impatient. When clarity settled, I agreed to apologize to Tiffany. The moment she heard it, Tiffany gloated harder, though she masked it in front of Julian. Because I just miscarried, Julian stayed home a few days, cooking, keeping me company while I read. I bided my time, then sent him on an errand the instant he stepped out. Tiffany arrived minutes later. Since our hospital encounter she had transformed. Flawless makeup, rosy cheeks, anyone would say she glowed. She looked triumphant. The door was unlocked. She walked in to find me on the patio opening parcels of baby clothes. I'd bought them before the miscarriage and never unpacked them. Now I spread them out with her watching. Predictably her mouth curled, arms folded. She loomed over me. What's the point? The kid's dead. My hands stilled, but I lifted my gaze past her. She didn't notice. Silence fanned her arrogance. With an exaggerated smile she tilted her chin toward the tiny gold bracelet lying nearby. That baby keepsake bracelet. Wasted on you. Hand it over. I stared at the person behind Tiffany. My self-control snapped, and the tears I'd been stockpiling burst out. At the same moment, a voice came from behind her. Tiffany's smile froze. She hadn't expected Julian to walk in right then. Julian. Julian came over and wrapped his arms around me, stroking my back gently, and told her to get out. I buried my face in his chest, unable to suppress a laugh. The tremor of my shoulders made him think I was sobbing. Who could have guessed? I'd had a bug planted in Tiffany's phone ages ago. I'd counted on her showing up, which was why I'd sent Julian away. Are you all enjoying the performance? Idiots. Julian's heart ached even more for me. He seemed to have rediscovered his role, bereaved father, so he focused on me even harder. When he felt the empty, cold sheet beside him at midnight, he got up to look for me. Through the glass he saw me standing in the yard, a bonfire at my feet and scraps of scorched fabric scattered across the flagstones. He came closer. My face glistened in the firelight, strewn with tear tracks. In the hushed courtyard, only sparks crackled. Julian couldn't help folding me into his arms, and I turned into the embrace, deepening it. After a long while, I said, "Let's get divorced." Julian didn't refuse outright. He only held me tighter. "We're not getting divorced." Tiffany didn't give up during this time. She kept texting Julian, sometimes a headache, sometimes an upset stomach. Julian didn't want to let me go, yet he wouldn't abandon Tiffany either. The moment I understood that, I felt even sicker. He reached out to wipe the tears from the corner of my eye. I lowered my gaze and wouldn't look at him. If Julian wouldn't agree to the divorce, how could I push my plan forward? Julian wouldn't divorce, but someone else was desperate for him to. So when Eleanor and Tiffany showed up together, I wasn't surprised in the least. I'd engineered it. Tiffany had never been the patient type. Otherwise she wouldn't have flaunted herself at my door from the start. I'd intercepted every message Julian sent her, and with no reply, she quickly lost her composure. Eleanor had long been sick of me, so the two hit it off at once. They barged in looking ready to smash the place, plopping straight onto the sofa. I wasn't afraid in the least. "Luna, you've already lost the baby. Are you still refusing to divorce?" Eleanor cut straight to the chase. Tiffany studied her crimson nails, not bothering to spare me a glance. "Luna, Julian's heart is already mine." Those feeble lines couldn't ignite even a spark of anger in me. I laughed at Eleanor's stupidity. She had no clue what would happen once the marriage ended. I curved my lips and told Tiffany, "A mistress is always a mistress. Even if I divorce, you'll be one for life." I knew exactly how to stab her, and she rose to the bait. She grabbed something off the table and hurled it. The cup whistled past my ear. When that missed, she lunged to hit me. I caught her wrist and slapped her, then swung my other hand and slapped Eleanor too. For a second both women were stunned. Eleanor came to her senses, sat on the floor, and threw a tantrum, sobbing while she dialed Julian to claim I bullied them. I snatched the phone before she could speak and said into it, "Let's get divorced." Eleanor and Tiffany's farce finally pushed Julian to agree to the divorce. Both women thought they'd won, but that was exactly what I wanted. Julian offered to compensate me. I said there was no need, because the payment I demanded would arrive very soon. On the last day of November, Julian and I divorced. Tiffany tagged along to the Los Angeles County Clerk's office the entire time. Julian and I both pretended she wasn't there. The instant the papers were signed, Tiffany looped her arm through Julian's and chirped, "We're already here. Why don't we get married today?" She shot me a pointed glance. Her words dropped like a stone into still water. I stayed unruffled, but the clerks couldn't hide their shock. Their expressions were complicated, as though they'd swallowed a fly, afraid Julian would refuse. Tiffany added leverage. "The baby's almost 6 months along. He needs a father." What? The baby was already 6 months. I could read the clerk's eyes as they stared at Tiffany. Tiffany, the center of attention, didn't care. She thought she'd captured Julian and I'd fallen out of favor. Just as the bureau produced a brand new married couple, I dialed my lawyer. Before father died, he had left a will. The gist: if my marriage was happy and never ended in divorce, Sterling's control could be shared with my husband, making half the company community property. But if we divorced, the man would walk away with nothing. Everything he'd received would be clawed back, and he would be banned from Sterling for life. Back then I thought I was blissful. Julian treated me well. We shared interests. Fate seemed to stitch us together. I couldn't grasp father's foresight. Now that I do, it's too late. After hanging up with the probate attorney, I sat back and waited to draw the net tight. The lawyer moved fast. Within days, Julian's shares, the house Eleanor lived in Beverly Hills, even Ivy's sports car, all of it was reclaimed. My phone nearly exploded. People called from new numbers, and I rejected every one. I knew who they were. I'd long since muted the phone and left it on the table while I hummed and tried cooking my favorite dish. The bug in Tiffany's phone was still active. Her hysterical arguments with Julian poured into my ears word for word. Idiots. They think a man is everything, yet they forget that very man leans on a woman. I began handling Sterling business, which meant I had to show up in person. I'd barely stepped out of the car at the downtown Los Angeles headquarters when I stumbled into a spectacle. Julian and Tiffany. One of them was barging toward the doors in desperation, while the other pretended to hold him back. The security guard looked ready to cry. He couldn't lay a hand on a pregnant woman. When the guard saw me, he called out, "Miss Sterling," and the single word sloshed over the pair of them like a glass of ice water, snapping them out of their grotesque little pantomime. Tiffany shrieked and lunged to hit me, but the two guards pinned her arms, one on each side. Why are unrelated people allowed inside Sterling? I asked the guards, though my eyes were fixed on Julian, a man who cherished dignity above everything. Could he bear this? Yet right there in the glittering, crowded lobby, Julian dropped to his knees with a thud. The polished marble threw back a humiliating mirror of his disgrace. His shirt was filthy with footprints, crumpled like waste paper, and in only a few days he had already wasted away. "Luna, please forgive me. I was wrong," he begged. Realizing I wasn't appeased, he crawled forward and dragged Tiffany down beside him. When he tried to clutch my ankles, the guards hauled him off. Tiffany stared, dumbstruck by the spectacle. I flicked my wrist. "Throw them out." Julian had lost his mind. Words tumbled out in a frantic flood. "Luna, it wasn't my fault. She seduced me. Then, Luna, you know how it felt to be broke. Damn it. That agony. Luna, you still love me, right? I'm sorry. If you want a baby, we can make another." I studied him, letting every wretched detail burn itself into my memory. When he needed me, I was Luna. When he didn't, I was still Luna. A man so obsessed with pride, sobbing and slobbering in front of strangers, yet not for me. For the money and power now beyond his reach. Get them out of here. I'd heard enough. In the chaos, Tiffany fainted. Confiscating their toys was only the start. Everything had come from Sterling in the first place. It had always been mine. After Tiffany collapsed, she was naturally rushed to UCLA Medical Center, and I took the opportunity to order an amniocentesis while she was still unconscious. When the procedure was over, she hadn't felt a thing. I intended to match the baby's DNA against Julian's. I knew exactly what kind of man Julian was, severely oligospermic, a fact I'd kept to myself for years. That was why, even without birth control, I'd rarely come close to conceiving. Perhaps he had almost forgotten. Suddenly expecting two children must have felt like a lottery win. I doubted Tiffany knew. A man's pride is at stake, and I'd stumbled on the secret by accident, so I was gambling. Overhearing Tiffany quarrel with Julian after his downfall, intuition pricked me. Maybe what Tiffany hungered for wasn't love at all. The answer came quickly. The baby wasn't Julian's. I sat on a hospital bench, paternity test sheet in hand, unable to stop laughing. Julian had killed his own child while bowing and scraping over someone else's. He'd probably forgotten he was sick, too busy preening between two pregnant women, and he'd forgotten who had given him everything. I tossed the listening device and sealed the report in an envelope addressed to Julian. Time to finish the play. The next news came from a police officer at the station. Giving my statement, I learned what had happened. The moment my courier package arrived, Julian assumed my heart had softened. Inside lay the DNA report. Discovering Tiffany's child wasn't his. Days of humiliation detonated into rage. It was all her fault. He snatched a knife from the kitchen and slashed at Tiffany. She suffered multiple deep cuts. Neighbors called 911. Her life was saved, but she will be permanently disabled. The officer asked why I'd mailed the report. I folded my hands, composed, only to give him the truth, to show him whose hand had toppled his empire. I skipped the first trial. I had a company to run. By the final hearing, Julian petitioned through the police to see me once. I agreed. By then his edge was gone. Stubble choked his jaw, livid half-moons beneath his eyes. When he saw me, his hand lifted. Handcuffs clinked. "Luna, this is the last time." I said nothing, only watched. "Tell me why," he rasped. I rose, already regretting the visit. More empty words. "The night you slapped me, I wanted the same answer." Without looking back, I left him weeping behind the bars. Finished. I moved away to escape the taint, then discovered wanderlust. I began to travel. I still drop by Sterling now and then, but most of my life is lived on the road. 1 year, in a small town in South Carolina, I spotted Eleanor. She'd drifted there, her hair white as frost. She stooped to collect a crushed can and dropped it into her sack. A passerby Goodbye, pitted the old woman, gulped the last of his water, and handed her the empty bottle. She thanked him with trembling gratitude. I pretended not to see. No more knots in my heart. I spent so many years loving others, I forgot to love myself. When I looked up, the clouds were rimmed with gold, soft as spun sugar. It was bound to be a beautiful day. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, please like and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more wonderful tales. See you next time.